Good morning. Today we're going to continue our study of Amos. We're going to look at chapter 7. So, the rest of Amos is the 5 visions that he had. In chapter 7, we talk about 2 of those visions. So go ahead and read chapter 7, verses 1 through 9, and you can pause me, and I'll be here when you get back. Okay, the first vision that Amos has is about swarms of locusts or grasshoppers, and it's after the king's share had been harvested, just as the second crop, the crop for the people, was coming up. God was going to send these locusts, but Amos cried out and said, God, please don't do this. Israel won't survive. So God heard Amos's prayer and relented. Some damage had been done, but not enough to make it fatal for the kingdom. And the second vision was fire. And this fire could have been, there's any number of things. It could have been a supernatural fire of God's judgment. It could have been a symbol of the day of judgment. It could have been a drought. It could have just been intense summer heat. But again, Amos prayed and God relented. These two, the locust and the fire, also could symbolize Assyria's attacks on Egypt. The first time they were repulsed, they were not able to get in. That could have been the locust. And the second one, they did invade, and that could have been the fire. Again, depending on the commentary you're looking at, maybe not. The third vision is the plumb line. So they used this plumb line on buildings, and this was kind of what we might call a code. If the building was not up to code, if it was not plumb, they destroyed it. It was not any good. It was not safe. It was not. They just destroyed the building if it was not plumb. So Amos is saying, you know what? Your nation is not plumb with the law. You have all these false worships, you're doing all these things that are wrong, you're not plumb. So this time Amos did not pray on behalf of Israel. And in verse 8, God says, I will spare them no longer. Another version says, I will not pass again by them, referencing the Passover again. Verse 9 talks about the high places of Isaac. It's not really Isaac. Isaac is just another nickname, if you will, for Israel. God is going to overthrow those high places, those places where there's idol worship, and basically he's going to overthrow the whole dynasty of the northern kingdom, all of Jeroboam's house. And the fact that Amos did not cry out this time is because he kind of knew. I mean, God told him this is going to happen. The first 2 times, Amos is trying to tell the Israelites, I don't want this to happen. I pretty much, even though you're the northern kingdom and kind of my enemy because I'm from the southern kingdom, I don't really want this to happen. And I'm doing everything I can to warn you. And I'm crying out to God on your behalf so that the people of the northern kingdom didn't think, he just hates us. So that was one reason that he did cry out. And now we're going to finish the chapter, so read verses 10 through 17. You can pause me, and I'll be here when you get back. Okay, so this is about this conversation between Amaziah, Amos, and God. And Amaziah is the high priest in Bethel. So he is a pagan priest. Bethel is pagan worship. You'll remember that Jeroboam set up this altar in Bethel so that his people didn't have to go down to Jerusalem, and he didn't want them to possibly stay in Jerusalem. So he set up this high place, a place of false worship. So Amaziah has the authority of a king. He is the priest, which means he's pretty high placed. And his name actually means Yahweh is strong. So it's like he's trying to appear to worship God, but they didn't really worship God the way God wants it. in these high places. And Amaziah just kind of takes the situation and maybe exaggerates a little bit. For example, he said, I'm going to destroy Jeroboam. Amos never said that. And it was God saying these things, not that Jeroboam's name ever came up. So Amaziah is just trying to incite the people. He's just trying to make everybody mad and get them on his side. In verses 12 and 13, he talks about this guy, Amos. He's just a seer. So the seer, they were like a dime a dozen at this time. Some of them probably could see visions from God, but most of the time they were just pretend. So he was not calling Amos a prophet. He was calling him a seer. And this reference to eating bread, go home to Judah and eat your bread there. Go make your living there. Go make your living there. You know what? Those people in Judah would love to hear you prophesying against the northern kingdom because they're kind of enemies now. They're not as brotherly as they should be. So yeah, go back to Judah. You can say whatever you want to about the northern kingdom. Just get out of our hair. And he again says, stop preaching at the house of Isaac. This is not the house of Isaac. This is not the house of God. This is the house of Israel that man has built. And he also calls it in verse 13, the king's sanctuary. Kind of a subconscious thing. He didn't even realize that he's saying the king's sanctuary. It is the king's sanctuary. It's not God's sanctuary, though. It is a man-made sanctuary. So in verse 14, Amos says, you know what? I was not a prophet. I was a shepherd. And God called me. I'm not trained. I didn't really see prophecy as my what I want to be when I grow up thing. It was more like God called me. I didn't really have any choice in this. So verses 16 and 17, you say, Amaziah, you say to stop prophesying. You say to shut up. But God says your women will be raped, which was very common when armies invaded. Your sons and daughters will be killed because they're so young they have no value as slaves. And your land will be divided up and parceled out as a reward for the Assyrians. And the people will die in Assyria. They're going to be taken to Assyria if they have any value at all. These are not happy things. These are bad things that are going to happen. We'll pick up tomorrow with chapter 8 and the vision of the ripe fruit. See you then.